As the dungeon raid begins, everyone starts mocking Reigo, calling him a bad omen to have on the raid. One guy even says they're basically carrying a walking death flag. Still, they had no other choice but to take him with them since they were short one person, and Reigo was the only hunter available. One by one, the monsters take down every single hunter until only Reigo remains standing. And instead of panicking like a normal person, Reigo starts laughing because this is exactly what he was waiting for. Even the monsters look caught off guard by this guy's confidence. And just to make things even worse for them, Reigo brings back all the dead hunters as his undead minions, forcing the same monsters who killed them to fight them all over again. In a twisted way, he's even giving the hunters one final chance to get revenge before heading to the afterlife. But Reigo wasn't always this confident or powerful. Before all of this, he was just a pathetic low-rank loser nobody respected. The kind of hunter people would look at and immediately think, yeah, this guy is not surviving the first episode. When Reigo goes looking for a job, he gets rejected immediately. There are all kinds of job listings available for A rank, B rank, even D and F rank hunters. But the moment he asks for work, nobody wants to hire him. Reigo keeps begging, saying please over and over again, but the job giver tells him that even if he keeps saying please, he just can't give him anything. Still, Reigo refuses to give up. He says he'll do any kind of work, he just needs something. That's when the people around him suddenly start talking behind his back. They say whenever Reigo joins a mission, dungeons collapse for some reason. Weapons break, monster swarms appear out of nowhere, and hunters keep running into disasters around him. They call him Calamity Reigo, yet somehow he still calls himself a hunter. At this point, nobody takes him seriously anymore. And honestly, the job giver doesn't want to risk it either. The guy probably values his building staying intact. But since Reigo keeps begging nonstop, the job giver finally gives in and says if Reigo really wants work that badly, then there's only one job he can do. Dead Hunter Relic Recovery. Then he shows him the job card. Reigo's face instantly drops. As he explains it, years ago a guild tried recovering belongings left behind by dead hunters inside a dungeon. But after touching the relics, their skills were mysteriously stolen, and the entire guild was wiped out. Since then, rumors spread that the relics are cursed, and any hunter who touches them loses their abilities. Because of that, relic recovery became the most hated job among hunters. And somehow, that's the only work Reigo qualifies for. But even then, he has no choice. He desperately needs money, so he accepts the job while thinking it can't be helped anymore. As Reigo arrives near the cave, he remembers what the job giver told him earlier. He said the recovered relics need to be taken directly to the processing facility because even the Hunter Association that requested them doesn't want anyone touching them. And standing there in front of the cave, Reigo starts wondering if he's really fallen this far, to the absolute lowest level of hunter work, relic recovery. He isn't happy about this job at all, but as Reigo looks around, he realizes there are plenty of other desperate people doing the same thing. So he pushes those thoughts aside and keeps searching through the ruins. After looking around for a while, the others complain that they can't find anything anymore. Most of the area was buried during the boss fight, so almost all the relics are probably crushed under the rubble. But Reigo keeps going anyway, and then suddenly, a notification appears in front of him. He gained 1 mana point. Reigo is instantly disappointed. All that effort for a single mana point. Truly life-changing rewards right there. Still, he decides to test whether the relics are actually cursed like the rumors say. So he uses the mana point without hesitating. And the moment he does, he awakens a new skill, mediumship. As soon as the skill activates, Reigo suddenly starts seeing dead people all around him. At first, he's completely confused and wonders if the skill only lets him see ghosts and nothing else. If that's really all it does, then the skill is basically useless for a hunter like him. It can't attack, defend, or support anyone. If anything, it just makes random ghosts gather around him and slowly destroys his peace of mind. Honestly, that sounds less like a skill and more like a curse with extra steps. But something about the ghosts feels strange. They're all unusually quiet. Reigo realizes the hunters who entered this dungeon were probably prepared to die from the start, and for a moment he feels relieved. Ever since awakening this strange ability, disasters kept happening around him, causing trouble for multiple guilds and earning him the nickname Calamity Reigo. But this time, it feels like nothing bad is going to happen. Then another notification suddenly appears. Mediumship switching to focus mode. The atmosphere instantly changes, and right in front of him, Reigo notices a ghost he recognizes immediately. It's the same B-rank hunter the job giver mentioned earlier, Nakanishi. Back then, the job giver explained that Nakanishi entered the dungeon to recover someone else's relics, but ended up dying himself around the 3rd layer. He also mentioned that Nakanishi saved a teammate who had a child waiting for them outside, proving he was genuinely a brave man. But even after his death, nobody wanted to retrieve his relics because of the curse rumors surrounding them. And now, that exact same man is standing right in front of Reigo as a ghost. His body is covered in injuries, yet even after death, he still hasn't moved on. Seeing this, Reigo can't help but admire him. This man risked his life to save his teammates without hesitation. But after staring at the ghost for a while, Reigo notices something strange. Nakanishi keeps looking in one direction the entire time. So Reigo follows his gaze and eventually finds a skeleton hidden nearby. Then he realizes the truth. Nakanishi was staring at his own remains. And at that moment, Reigo finally understands something. Mediumship isn't useless at all. It's actually helping him locate relics. This whole situation still feels complicated to Reigo. Even if mediumship helps him find relics, there's still the problem of the curse rumors surrounding them. But he doesn't really have a choice anymore. So he slowly reaches down and touches one of the swords near Nakanishi's remains. And nothing happens. No curse, no stolen skills, nothing at all. At first, Reigo starts thinking maybe the curse was just a rumor all along. But then he notices a small family photo among the relics. And suddenly, his expression changes. Nakanishi had children too. That's probably why his ghost kept staring at his belongings the whole time. Reigo quietly tells him he did well and hopes he can finally rest in peace. But of course, peace never lasts long around Reigo. A group of hunters suddenly notices him and immediately starts mocking him. One of them points out that he's actually doing relic recovery, while another nervously talks about the cursed relic rumors. Then one girl suddenly recognizes him. Calamity Reigo. The moment she says that name, she immediately wants to leave because she thinks getting involved with him will only bring disaster. But one of the guys there isn't scared at all. Instead, he notices the sword Reigo found and grabs it from him, saying the weapon looks way too good for someone like Reigo. Since they're the ones risking their lives fighting monsters, he thinks they deserve it more anyway. But the second he realizes it's actually a relic, he panics and instantly throws the sword away like it's radioactive. Then he completely loses his temper. He starts yelling at Reigo, asking what the hell he's doing letting other people touch cursed relics. He calls the relics filthy and says Reigo is basically just a grave robber surviving off dead hunters. At this point, the insults just keep getting worse. One of the girls suddenly mentions that Reigo is probably searching for his brother's relics. The guy gets confused and asks what she means. So she explains that Reigo's older brother was Yugo Korizato, a legendary S-rank hunter. But according to the rumors, he supposedly died inside a low-level dungeon. After hearing that, the guy starts mocking him even harder, saying maybe his brother lied about being S-rank in the first place. And that's the one thing Reigo can't tolerate. He immediately snaps back, saying his brother is still alive. But the guy just laughs in his face. He says it looks like both brothers are complete failures. One disappeared, while the other survives by scavenging through dead people's belongings. Then things get physical. The guy starts kicking over the relics, smashing things around, and even kicks Reigo himself while insulting him non-stop. Reigo keeps telling him to stop, but the guy only gets crueler. He calls him disgusting, creepy, worthless trash who shouldn't even call himself a hunter. And then he says something that hits even harder. He tells Reigo not to get involved with anyone ever again and to just disappear from the world completely. Then we see the ghosts silently watching everything unfold. And while the other hunters keep mocking and disrespecting the dead, Reigo finally reaches his limit. The guy keeps stomping over the relics and kicking everything around like it means nothing. And seeing that completely enrages Reigo. He says they can insult him all they want, but the hunters who died here fought while risking their lives. So the least they deserve is respect. Then Reigo looks at him with pure anger and tells him not to dare step on the belongings of the dead with his filthy feet. And the moment he says that, the atmosphere completely changes. A terrifying pressure suddenly erupts from Reigo as his skill activates again. The ghosts surrounding the area begin reacting to him, almost as if they're answering his anger. A notification suddenly appears. Hunter Nakanishi's ghost has possessed the equipment. And just like that, a completely new kind of power awakens inside Reigo. The same guy who was mocking him a few seconds ago can't even process what he's seeing anymore. He keeps staring at Reigo while feeling that terrifying pressure crushing down on him. In his mind, he keeps thinking this guy is supposed to be just an F-rank hunter, so what is this insane pressure coming from him? Something clearly isn't normal anymore. But before things can go any further, the others immediately grab their friend and drag him away. And once they leave, the pressure surrounding Reigo slowly disappears as well. Later, we see Reigo standing in front of a large house. It belongs to Nakanishi. Reigo quietly thinks to himself that he didn't expect Nakanishi to live somewhere this nice. The Hunter Association ordered all recovered relics to be taken straight to the disposal site, but without even even thinking about it, he ended up bringing them here instead. After all, no matter how many belongings hunters loot inside dungeons, their families would still want them to come home one last time. So Reigo decides to return Nakanishi's belongings personally. As he stands there, someone suddenly comes out of the house and asks who he is. Reigo introduces himself and explains that while recovering relics inside the dungeon, he found these belongings. The moment he shows the items, a little girl instantly recognizes them and starts crying, saying they belong to her father. And honestly, that alone already hurts enough. But then an older man suddenly walks out from inside the house, and without hesitation, he smacks the belongings right out of the little girl's hands. He calls both the relics and Reigo disgusting, then demands to know how Reigo dared bring cursed mementos back to their home. The old man is completely furious. He even starts hitting Reigo while shouting that he'll sue him for violating Hunter Association regulations. Then he says there's no way his son could possibly be dead because he was a B-rank hunter. And then he says something Reigo never expected to hear. He asks if his son's death was somehow Reigo's fault. Reigo is genuinely shocked hearing this accusation, but the old man keeps going. He says Reigo must have set him up somehow. Meanwhile, the rest of the family is crying in the background, and the entire situation just becomes more painful to watch. Reigo desperately tries explaining that he never even knew Nakanishi personally. Then he accidentally starts mentioning Nakanishi's ghost, which only makes things even worse. Now the family thinks he's making up insane excuses to avoid responsibility. The old man completely loses it and starts threatening him, saying he has connections inside the Hunter Association and will make sure Reigo never joins another guild again. Then he suddenly tells someone inside the house to bring salt. At this point, Reigo probably realizes returning the belongings personally may not have been his smartest decision. Later, Reigo quietly prays and apologizes to Nakanishi, saying he's sorry he couldn't be of more help. But just as he starts walking away, something strange suddenly happens. An eerie aura begins flowing out from the relics. Reigo immediately turns around in shock and calls out Nakanishi's name. Then another notification appears. Mediumship focus mode activated. And right after that, Nakanishi's ghost appears once again. Reigo apologizes to him again, saying he's sorry he couldn't return him home properly and wonders if that's why he showed up again. Then Reigo starts opening up a little. He explains that maybe he was only acting on his own emotions. He says he also has an older brother, and although everyone claims he's dead, not even a single memento of him was ever recovered. To Reigo, even finding one belonging would have been enough to bring him home. But then he lowers his head and admits maybe that's just an excuse. In the end, he still overstepped. As he stands there quietly, we suddenly see flashes from his past. News broadcasts announcing the death of legendary S-rank hunter Yugo Kurosato. People whispering behind Reigo's back, calling him a jinx and saying disasters always happen around him. Even his own mother eventually telling him she's tired of all the trouble surrounding him. Hearing those words again completely crushes him inside. Then Reigo quietly asks Nakanishi something painful. He asks if, in the world of the dead, he has seen his brother. Nakanishi doesn't answer with words. He simply closes his eyes and gives a small smile. And somehow that silence hurts even more. Reigo then admits something he's probably been holding in for a long time. Maybe he just isn't cut out to be a hunter. He says he still can't accept his brother's death because there's no proof he ever died. No relics, no remains, nothing. Reigo became a hunter specifically to search for him, but with a strange skill like mediumship, the dungeons he can enter are extremely limited. Even when he joins guilds, he only becomes a burden to everyone else. And after everything that's happened, he's starting to think maybe he'll never find his brother after all. He says his brother was strong, respected, and surrounded by allies, completely different from him, because no matter where Reigo goes, he always ends up alone. But then, unexpectedly, Nakanishi gently places a hand on his shoulder and slowly shakes his head. Reigo looks surprised for a moment. It's almost like Nakanishi is trying to tell him that none of that is true, or maybe that he should follow him. Then suddenly, Nakanishi's body starts dissolving into glowing energy. The aura twists and spirals together until it forms a massive portal unlike anything Reigo has ever seen before. The color itself feels unnatural. Reigo stares at it in complete shock and says he's never seen a gate with colors like this before. Then he wonders why Nakanishi led him there in the first place. But before he can think any further, a violent gravitational force suddenly erupts from inside the portal. Reigo desperately tries grabbing onto the ground to stop himself from getting pulled in, but the force is way too strong. And within seconds, he gets dragged straight into the gate. Then, after finally landing inside, Reigo slowly looks up, only to see a mysterious figure wearing an eye patch staring directly at him with an incredibly curious expression. dungeon. Reigo suddenly finds himself inside a strange catacomb-like structure. The atmosphere is creepy, the walls are ancient, and there's not a single sign of normal human life anywhere. Naturally, the first thing he starts doing is desperately looking for an exit. He keeps thinking that if this is a dungeon, then there has to be a way out somewhere. Because if he gets trapped inside with his current abilities, he's completely finished. But no matter how much he searches, things only get worse. The moment he finally spots what looks like an exit, a massive monster suddenly bursts out from it. Then a notification appears. Boss, Shadow Flame has appeared. And immediately, Reigo realizes how screwed he is. This isn't a normal dungeon. It's a quest-type gate, meaning there's only one way to leave. Defeat the boss. Unfortunately for Reigo, the boss looks like it could bench press a truck for fun. The monster starts chasing him through the catacombs while Reigo runs for his life, wondering why he of all people ended up inside such a high-difficulty dungeon. At this point, the buffalo-like monster basically starts treating him like a football, smashing him around the area non-stop. Reigo notices the creature gets briefly stuck on part of the ruins, but even then, he realizes it'll break free any second. And honestly, he's already mentally giving up. He thinks there's no way he can win against something like this. He doesn't have combat skills, insane strength, or some fearless protagonist mentality. As he puts it himself, he definitely does not have titanium balls. So he starts accepting that this might really be the end for him. But then he suddenly notices something nearby. Nakanishi's sword. Without realizing it, he brought the relic with him into the gate. And the moment he sees it, one thought immediately crosses his mind. He still needs to return it to Nakanishi's family somehow. Then suddenly, another notification appears in front of him. Do you wish to use all mana points? There's also a warning saying it's extremely dangerous for a hunter's mana to completely reach 0 inside a gate. Normally, nobody would ever press yes after reading something like that. But Reigo has already accepted he's probably dead anyway. So if using all his mana gives him even the smallest chance to protect the relic, then he'll do it. His entire body starts reacting. Then multiple notifications appear one after another. Mediumship has leveled up to level 2. By consuming all possessed mana points, the hidden skill Friendship in the underworld has been activated. And right after that, Reigo suddenly sees a mysterious figure standing before him. The figure looks at him with complete disbelief and asks what exactly he's supposed to be. Then the voice realizes Reigo isn't Nakanishi, which means this ghost is someone else entirely. The figure then looks down at Reigo lying there half dead and casually asks why he's relaxing so lazily when he's about to die. Honestly, getting roasted by a ghost while fighting for your life is a new level of disrespect. The mysterious figure keeps staring down at Reigo before bluntly telling him he's a pathetic idiot loser. But then she says today is his lucky day because he still has a chance to survive. She points at Nakanishi's sword and asks why he isn't using it already. Then she starts roasting him even harder, asking if he's really so hopeless that he can't even swing a sword properly. Meanwhile, Reigo is already mentally broken at this point. He starts tearing up and says the sword is useless for someone like him. Maybe it would be better if he just died here instead of continuing to hurt people and getting blamed for spreading calamities everywhere he goes. Because no matter what happens, people always end up hating him anyway. Then, surprisingly, the mysterious woman suddenly goes quiet for a moment because Reigo's words remind her of herself. She starts remembering how people treated her in the past too. How everyone blamed her whenever things went wrong, even though she fought while risking her life for them. How they called her a witch and accused her of manipulating everyone. And in the end, instead of thanking her, they executed her in the most horrifying way possible, hoping she would never return again. Seeing Reigo lying there broken and hopeless almost irritates her, because to her, he looks exactly like the weak version of herself she hates remembering. So she gets angry. She asks him if he's really satisfied with ending things like this, being misunderstood, hated, and doing nothing except crying about how lonely he is. Then she tells him something that hits hard. Even though he's still alive, his mindset already belongs to someone who lost. She says when she was killed, she couldn't do anything back then either. Just like Reigo, she was falsely branded a traitor and called an evil witch before being tied to a stake and burned alive. And because of that, she tells him he has no right to sit there crying so pathetically. Watching him reminds her of her own humiliation, and honestly, it disgusts her. But that's exactly why she refuses to let him give up, because she sees herself inside him. So she tells him to pick up his sword, crawl through the mud if he has to, and cling to life no matter how miserable it looks. Then she gives him one final command: fight, and if he refuses to resist on his own, then she'll force him to. And just like that, the mysterious woman forces this pathetic loser to finally move. Reigo grabs the sword and barely manages to swing at the monster right before it crushes him. Seeing that alone makes her a little satisfied. She says this is how an actual living human should act. Then, as a small favor to someone carrying the same regrets she once had, she decides to lend him a tiny bit of her power. Even then, Reigo is still confused out of his mind and keeps wondering who this woman even is. But before before he can think any further, the broken sword suddenly starts glowing with a magnificent aura. The entire atmosphere changes instantly. Then, the connection between them fully establishes. The woman immediately warns Rhaego to maintain his ego and not let her completely take over his body. Since he activated the hidden skill himself, she says he should be capable of resisting her influence. Then she reminds him of something important. This is his fight. So instead of acting like a pathetic loser, she tells him to stand up and show that oversized buffalo who's really in charge here. And finally, she reveals her name. She says she is the warrior of oracles, Joan of Arc. Right after that, another notification appears. Joan of Arc has possessed the broken sword. And honestly, hearing a legendary historical figure casually announce herself inside a dungeon was probably not on Rhaego's bingo card today. But the effect is immediate. The same tiny weakling who was getting tossed around like a chew toy a few moments ago now slowly stands back up and faces the boss directly. The buffalo monster instantly senses the change. But then something even crazier happens. Rhaego's sword suddenly starts growing larger and larger, overflowing with aura until it becomes massive enough to properly face the monster head-on. And for the first time since the fight started, the boss actually looks nervous. But in the middle of all this chaos, Rhaego suddenly remembers something from 2 years ago, back when his brother was still around. Even though Rhaego constantly called himself worthless, his brother never once laughed at him for it. Instead, he kept encouraging him to continue trying to become a hunter. He even told Rhaego not to make fun of himself like that, because in his eyes, Rhaego was more amazing than he was. And hearing something like that from an S-rank hunter felt almost unbelievable. But his brother genuinely meant it. He explained that while strength and talent matter, Rhaego had something much rarer: the ability to understand people's sorrow, pain, and emotions. He could empathize with others in ways most hunters never could. And to his brother, that made Rhaego's skill truly special. Remembering those words now, Rhaego slowly tightens his grip on the sword while standing face to face with the buffalo boss once again. Even Joan of Arc starts looking interested now. She's curious to see what this little pipsqueak is actually capable of doing. Then the buffalo monster charges straight toward him. And this time, instead of running away immediately, Rhaego swings his sword with everything he has. The blade releases a massive fiery tornado that tears through the air and slashes toward the boss. It seems Joan's connection to Hellfire somehow caused the sword itself to start overflowing with flames. And for the first time, Rhaego feels like he might actually stand a chance. Unfortunately, the boss immediately decides violence is the answer to everything and fires a gigantic beam attack straight from its mouth. Honestly, the thing basically pulls out a dungeon-sized Kamehameha. Rhaego quickly creates a shield to defend himself, but then he notices something strange. The sword is actually absorbing the flames from the attack like some kind of cursed vacuum cleaner. But before Rhaego can celebrate, the power suddenly fades away. And now he's forced to start sprinting for his life again, while the dungeon turns into a full-on barbecue zone. Meanwhile, Joan is laughing the entire time. She says it makes sense he can't bring out the sword's full power because it isn't actually her original weapon. If she's going to fully possess something properly, then ideally it should be her own sword, which unfortunately is nowhere to be found. Then she casually asks what he plans to do now. Meanwhile, Rhaego is busy doing his best impression of a track athlete while trying not to get roasted alive. As he keeps running, he desperately starts thinking of a strategy. Maybe he can stop the monster's movements again before attacking. Or maybe he should keep swinging the sword while dodging the flames until he finds an opening. But the boss is way too fast, and before he can decide anything, the monster closes the distance again. That's when Rhaego suddenly uses his other skill. Immediately, the dead hunters inside the dungeon rise once again as his undead soldiers. And honestly, their second attempt at surviving is not going much better than the first one. The undead hunters charge toward the boss while Rhaego desperately tries supporting them. But the flames are way too intense. One by one, the undead soldiers start panicking and running away from the fire while yelling that they need healing spells immediately. At this point, even the undead workforce is threatening to quit on him. Rhaego then tells everyone he'll hold the monster back somehow, so they should just run while they still can. While the battle keeps getting more chaotic, Rhaego desperately tries thinking of some kind of strategy. But this time, something feels different. As he fights alongside the undead hunters, he suddenly starts feeling a strange connection with all the ghosts around him. Their emotions begin flowing directly into his mind. Their regrets, their fears, their unfinished wishes. It's like he can feel every painful thing they carried before dying. And then Rhaego finally understands something. Within the ghosts, he can see their regrets clearly. And that realization immediately reminds him of what his brother once told him. That his true strength was his ability to understand other people's feelings. At that moment, everything finally clicks together. His power was never meant to be simple combat strength. The real ability of mediumship is hearing the voices of those nobody else listens to. The voices of the forgotten dead. And by responding to those feelings, his power grows stronger. Rego finally understands why he alone can see spirits. Then, instead of panicking, he starts commanding the ghosts properly for the first time. He calls out to them and tells everyone to gather together because now is the time for all of them to combine their strength. And as the ghosts hear his voice, all of their emotions begin responding at once. One ghost says he wants revenge against the monster that killed them. Another says he wants to save his comrades. Another only wants to return home to his family. And another quietly says he just doesn't want to keep suffering anymore. All those emotions begin merging together into one overwhelming force. And as that happens, the sword in Rego's hand starts growing even larger while its aura explodes in power. For the first time, the dead hunters begin believing something. If it's Rego, maybe they can finally win. Even Joan of Arc looks genuinely surprised now after seeing how naturally he united the spirits together. Then more ghosts begin gathering around Rego one after another. They start entrusting their wishes to him. One asks him to fight together with them. Another begs him to avenge their comrades. Others simply tell him to use their power however he needs. At this point, Rego isn't fighting alone anymore. He's carrying all of their hopes together. And with the massive glowing sword in his hands, Rego finally charges forward while shouting that he's going in. As Rego swings his fiery sword with all the power of the ghosts behind him, the monster gets completely overwhelmed. In a single attack, the creature is sliced apart and burned to a crisp instantly. Then a notification appears. Quest clear, defeated Nushi Jado Flame. And the moment the boss falls, all the ghosts surrounding Rego suddenly start cheering. Some are laughing, some are celebrating, some are just relieved it's finally over. Honestly, after everything they suffered, the dead hunters are throwing a better victory party than most living raid teams. And then, one by one, the spirits finally begin disappearing peacefully. Now that the curse binding them is gone, they can finally move on to the other world. Rego quietly thanks all of them and says they can finally go home now. Meanwhile, Joan watches the entire scene silently. Then she admits she's genuinely impressed. According to her, Rego managed to gather and stir the hearts of weak ghosts whose voices normally can't even be heard. And on top of that, the sword was possessed by all of them simultaneously. At that moment, Joan finally realizes something important. Maybe summoning her wasn't a mistake after all. Maybe Rego could actually become the person capable of lifting her curse someday. But before the emotional moment can continue, Rego completely runs out of energy and collapses onto the ground. And immediately, Joan ruins the mood again. She says she takes back everything nice she just thought about him because he's still the same pathetic loser as always. Rego just laughs bitterly while staring at the relic nearby and says he should probably return it properly first. Later on, we see the relic placed respectfully near Nakanishi's home. The little girl comes outside, notices it, and immediately starts crying while remembering her father. Meanwhile, Rego and Joan secretly watch everything from a distance while hiding. Joan comments that the girl is pretty naive, but Rego immediately tells her that if she has a problem with it, then she shouldn't watch. Then Rego suddenly realizes something shocking. Joan actually managed to leave the dungeon together with him. Even Joan herself seems confused by it. She says that for some reason, she was somehow able to come outside attached to him. And hearing that immediately gives Rego another idea. If Joan left the dungeon already, that means there probably aren't any important cursed entities remaining inside anymore. Which means he can finally sell the dungeon rights. Later, Rego meets with two miners to negotiate the sale. The miners inspect the dungeon and admit the mining rights seem valuable enough because there are decent resources inside. Then the explanation comes up that normally, the guild which clears a dungeon owns the management and mining rights to it. But if an independent, unaffiliated hunter clears a dungeon alone, they can legally sell those rights to specialized mining companies instead. The miners then look at Rego and comment that he's pretty unusual for someone so young. According to them, unaffiliated hunters are usually the type who gamble everything on risky opportunities instead of choosing stability. But Rego immediately tells them that's none of their business and asks the only thing he actually cares about: how much money he's getting. The miners estimate the dungeon rights are worth roughly 1 million. And the moment Rego hears that number, his brain almost stops functioning. 1 million. For someone who spent most of his life struggling to even survive, that amount feels absolutely insane. Still, Rego desperately tries acting calm, so he doesn't embarrass himself in front of them. Then they finalize the contract, and later, Rego keeps staring at his account while waiting for the payment nervously. And finally, the money arrives. The moment the deposit appears, Rego immediately starts thinking about all the things he can finally do now. Buy decent clothes, get a haircut, eat actual good food for once. Honestly, this might be the happiest the guy has been in years. Meanwhile, inside a massive luxurious house, a man is calmly training when his assistant suddenly rushes in with urgent news. The assistant reports that a gate unexpectedly appeared inside a suburban cemetery, and the mana detected there was overwhelming. When investigators checked the dungeon afterward, they discovered the boss monster's corpse completely burned to ashes by abnormal firepower. And according to them, that level of destructive power is extremely rare, even among S-rank hunters. They also confirm one more thing. They don't believe an interdimensional being was responsible. The man immediately asks the important question, was the holy relic there? But the assistant says they still can't confirm it. Hearing that, the man quietly starts thinking, so someone got there before them. Maybe it's just some thief planning to sell the remains for money. Or maybe someone else with the same type of ability as him is searching for relics too. He then mentions how things were convenient until now because everyone avoided those cursed remains out of fear and superstition. But if another relic user has appeared, then this situation could become troublesome. Still, he doesn't seem worried at all. Instead, he casually says that whatever this person's goal is, he can't allow them to keep the relic. And as a proper introduction, he'll simply kill them and take it back himself. Yeah, this guy clearly skipped the normal human interaction tutorial. Meanwhile, back with Rego, things feel completely different now. For the first time in a long while, he actually feels good. Really good. As he moves around, he realizes his body feels lighter and healthier than ever before. He can't even remember the last time he felt this alive. Meanwhile, Joan of Arc has been watching him quietly. At first, she complains that she's getting tired of waiting around, but after noticing Rego's expression and presence, even she becomes a little surprised. Something about him has changed, and honestly, Rego feels it too. For the first time, he genuinely wants to become stronger, because now he finally understands something important. If he becomes stronger, maybe he can protect people instead of bringing them disasters. Maybe he can recover what was lost. Maybe he can finally search for his brother properly. So no matter what happens, he decides he needs to keep growing stronger. Then he directly asks Joan if she'll help him, but Joan instantly refuses. She says she has no interest in helping some pathetic little loser who cries the moment a strong enemy appears. Still, Rego keeps begging her nonstop, and eventually Joan finally gives him a condition. She says if he can find her beloved relic, then maybe she'll consider helping him seriously. Specifically, she wants him to find Fireboy's sword. After hearing that nickname, Rego is completely confused because that explanation honestly answers absolutely nothing. But even so, he understands one thing clearly. If he wants to prove he's no longer the pathetic loser everyone thinks he is, then this journey starts now. After selling the mining rights, work on the mine finally begins the next day. But then the dangerous guy we saw earlier suddenly appears there. And honestly, things go bad immediately. The dude casually takes down everyone working at the site like it's nothing. After that, he starts questioning the miners about who sold the rights and where the relics went. But the miners genuinely don't know much. All they can say is that the seller never even gave his real name before disappearing. Hearing that answer clearly annoys him. After beating everyone down, he sneers and starts insulting them, saying trash is always useless, especially scavengers like them. According to him, people like this are sloppy, inefficient, and honestly more useful dead than alive. Yeah, this guy definitely wakes up every morning ready to ruin somebody's day. Then he suddenly starts using his own skill. A strange aura forms around him as he begins analyzing the traces of mana left behind at the site, and what he discovers instantly excites him. He explains that hunters transform their mana into unique abilities, meaning powerful hunters leave behind powerful aura traces, and the mana lingering here is incredibly dense. To him, that means the relic owner must have possessed extraordinary skills. And if he can obtain relics from someone that powerful, then he himself can become even stronger. At this point, the guy is practically smiling like he just found legendary loot in a gacha game. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the danger approaching him, Rego is busy enjoying life for once. We see him drinking a frappuccino while looking genuinely happy. He keeps talking about how legendary it tastes and says he can't believe something this delicious even exists. Honestly, after all the suffering this guy went through, let him enjoy the drink. But Joan immediately ruins the moment. She tells him this isn't the time to relax and says they need to leave already. Rego tries defending himself by explaining that after his brother disappeared, he spent years living in poverty, so luxury stuff like this was impossible for him before. And then he reminds her it's not even tea. But Joan still refuses to care. She says there's no time to waste standing around. Then Rego asks her about the relic again and accidentally messes up the name. He asks if it was called something like Full Book. Joan instantly gets annoyed and asks if he's messing with her on purpose. Then she clarifies once again that her beloved relic is Fireboy's sword. Even after becoming a spirit trapped inside the dungeon, she has no idea where the weapon ended up, and without it, she can't use her abilities at full power. The moment Reigo realizes they're talking about an insanely powerful relic, he becomes genuinely interested. But unfortunately, someone nearby overhears the conversation. Suddenly, countless strange eyes begin appearing all around the area. The atmosphere instantly turns dangerous, and then that same mysterious guy from earlier appears right in front of them. He looks confused at first, because the thick, powerful aura he traced earlier feels completely different from Reigo's weak-looking presence. So now he's wondering if he somehow tracked the wrong person. He stares at Reigo and questions whether this potato-headed kid really cleared that hidden dungeon and defeated the boss. Honestly, he looks deeply offended by the possibility. Then he asks Reigo directly if he has some kind of special skill. But after looking at him for a bit longer, the guy seems to decide Reigo probably isn't much of a threat anyway. So he casually asks him for the relics taken from the dungeon nucleus, like he's politely asking to borrow a pen or something. Reigo is caught completely off guard at first after hearing the guy ask about the relics. But after thinking about it for a second, he honestly can't understand what relic this dude is even talking about. In his mind, that dungeon didn't really have anything special inside it. The only thing he personally took was Nakanishi's sword. Then the guy gets irritated and asks if Reigo plans on staying silent forever. So Reigo simply says there were no relics there. But the man immediately laughs. He says lying won't help at all. Then he casually explains that if Reigo hands the relic over nicely, he might let him live after taking what he wants. But if Reigo refuses, then he'll take the relic first and kill him afterward anyway. And honestly, this guy says horrifying things with way too much calmness. Then suddenly, another violent attack comes flying toward Reigo. Everything becomes blurry for a moment before freezing energy crashes into the area again. Joan immediately tells Reigo to stop panicking and properly use his skill to look carefully. So Reigo focuses harder this time, and the moment he does, he finally notices something terrifying. All kinds of strange aura are surrounding the man, including a ghost standing beside him. After seeing that, Reigo gets genuinely disturbed. Then he notices the sword in the man's hand and suddenly realizes something. That weapon is a relic too. The man seems impressed Reigo figured that out so quickly and casually admits he obtained the relic recently. Then he explains something even worse. The original owner died inside a dungeon before accomplishing their goal. Apparently, the hunter used eye-based abilities while alive, and after death, those powers became attached to the relic. The man says the abilities themselves aren't especially strong, but they make excellent disposable tools. At that point, Reigo finally understands what's happening. The ghost beside him isn't there willingly. It's being bound and used. But then Reigo gets confused because the man himself doesn't seem capable of actually seeing ghosts. Joan immediately explains the reason. Seeing spirits is Reigo's unique ability. He's the only one who can properly see them. The man can't even see Joan standing there either. After realizing that, Reigo looks more carefully at the ghost beside the man, and what he sees genuinely upsets him. The spirit looks exhausted and tormented beyond belief. Unlike the other ghosts Reigo met, this one isn't at peace at all. Meanwhile, the man notices Reigo muttering to himself and gets annoyed again. He tells Reigo to hurry up and hand over the relic already before he decides to take it by force instead. And honestly, he sounds perfectly fine with either option. That's when Reigo finally snaps. He says he can't stand watching someone use the relic of a dead hunter like this, binding their ghost, tormenting them, treating them like disposable garbage even after death. So Reigo directly orders him to let the ghost go immediately. But instead of taking him seriously, the man just smirks and says he has no idea what Reigo is talking about. The evil dude smirks and says Reigo's angry face is actually pretty cute and he wants to see more of it. Then, without warning, he launches another attack. This one is way stronger than before, forcing even Reigo to step back while trying to block it. And the guy casually says this is only the beginning. Meanwhile, Reigo is panicking internally because he realizes he needs another weapon fast. He already used up Mr. Nakanishi's folding sword earlier. Then, while quickly looking around, he spots a tiny knife nearby. And honestly, it looks about as threatening as Butter Knife DLC. Still, Reigo immediately asks Joan to possess it. Joan is instantly offended. She says there's no way she's possessing something that cheap and vulgar. She genuinely sounds more insulted by the knife than by the enemy trying to kill them. But then Reigo activates mediumship anyway. And since the process already started, Joan gets dragged into the knife against her will. Now she's even more annoyed and starts yelling about how he forced her to possess that ugly thing. Then she suddenly realizes something important. Reigo learned how to force possession. And honestly, Even she didn't expect the potato boy to pull that off this quickly. Meanwhile, the evil dude is loving all of this chaos. He says Reigo is really good at teasing him, but he's done waiting around. Then he attacks again. But this time, something feels different. Instead of getting blown away instantly, Reigo actually rushes straight toward him. The guy blocks the attack and admits Reigo isn't half bad for a potato-headed kid. Then he counters hard enough to send Reigo flying backward again. At the same time, he notices the relic sword in his hand got damaged, and instead of carrying it all, he casually throws it away, saying he doesn't need it anymore. Then Reigo suddenly notices another huge aura building around him. The guy happily says perfect timing and pulls out yet another relic. Apparently this man changes cursed weapons faster than people change mobile wallpapers. He complains the previous relic wasn't cute enough, so now he's moving on to the next one. Then he activates necromancy, and even while the trapped ghost desperately begs to be released, the guy ignores it completely. Seeing that instantly enrages Reigo. Then massive chains covered in glowing pink aura burst toward him and smash directly into the knife Joan possessed. Even the evil dude pauses for a second and says the whole thing looks unbelievably vulgar, and somehow Joan probably agrees. Then the guy tosses that relic away too like it's garbage and says he doesn't need this one anymore either. After that, he pulls out a wand and decides maybe this relic will be more entertaining. The next attack comes flying toward Reigo so fast he can barely even see it move. The projectile curves through the air in impossible directions before striking. Reigo is completely confused and asks what that attack even was because he literally couldn't see anything. The evil dude then proudly says that now that he finally picked the right relic, he's going to enjoy making Reigo suffer with it. And once again, he demands the relic Reigo found inside the dungeon. But while all of this is happening, Reigo notices something horrifying. All the ghosts surrounding the man are suffering terribly. The guy keeps using them, throwing them away, and switching relics non-stop without caring what happens to the spirits trapped inside them. At this point, the entire area is filled with miserable ghosts in agony. Reigo looks at him and genuinely asks if he really can't see their suffering. Then he says the guy is desecrating the relics themselves. He asks how he can use them like this without feeling the sorrow and pain trapped inside them. And surprisingly, those words actually affect the evil dude for a moment, because hearing that suddenly reminds him of someone from his past. Someone who once asked him if he could really not understand the pain and suffering of his own teammates. For the first time, his expression changes slightly, and right at that moment, Reigo attacks him. Then, right in the middle of the fight, the guy suddenly introduces himself. He says his name is Argio, and then he casually asks Reigo for his name too. Meanwhile, Reigo is still busy trying not to get turned into Swiss cheese by flying relic attacks, but he finally answers and says his name is Reigo Corazzato. The moment Argio hears that surname, his expression instantly changes. Then he says he knew it. Reigo is Hugo Corazzato's younger brother. Hearing his brother's name immediately catches Reigo off guard, and he asks Argio if he actually knew Hugo. But Argio almost sounds offended by the question. He says what does Reigo mean by knew him? Hugo wasn't just someone he met once. He was Argio's guild leader. And then Argio casually drops something absolutely insane. He says Hugo was also the man who tried to kill him. The moment Reigo hears that, he's completely shocked. Meanwhile, Argio looks weirdly excited just talking about the past. He says the struggle of fighting alongside those people was pure ecstasy for him. Just remembering those days makes him unbelievably happy. Honestly, this guy talks about near-death experiences the way normal people talk about favorite vacation memories. Then suddenly, another attack comes flying toward Reigo, but this time, something strange happens. As Reigo watches the incoming arrow, he suddenly realizes everything around him is moving unbelievably slowly. The arrow suddenly feels unbelievably slow to Reigo. At this point, he can casually move out of the way without much trouble. But while dodging, he notices Argio is still moving around normally, jumping all over the battlefield like a complete maniac. And Reigo honestly has no idea why everything suddenly feels slowed down for him. But before he can think too much about it, Argio suddenly appears right in front of him and punches him straight in the face, sending him flying backward. As Reigo struggles to get back up, Argio starts looking confused. He says that was strange because he felt some kind of resistance slowing him down for a second. Now he's wondering if this is Reigo's skill. Then Joan immediately complains. She says the slowing effect is actually her skill, not Reigo's. And she also roasts him for standing there instead of properly dodging the punch. According to her, because Reigo forced her into possessing such a low-grade weapon, she can't fully stop Argio's movements. Reigo quickly realizes her ability is similar to the Shadow Clamp skill from earlier. But Joan immediately warns him not to relax because Argio is already attacking again. Then another arrow comes flying toward him at insane speed while overflowing with aura. But this time, Reigo barely manages to dodge it again. Joan explains explains that she can't completely stop Argio's movements, but she can slow him down right before his attacks. And thankfully, that tiny opening is just enough for Reigo to avoid the arrows. Argio starts grinning now. He admits he doesn't fully understand what kind of weird skill Reigo has, but for a potato-headed kid, he's surprisingly impressive. But Reigo only cares about one thing now, his brother. So while fighting, he demands to know what happened to Yugo after everything. Argio casually replies that he has no idea. The last thing he remembers is attacking Yugo, after which Yugo abandoned his teammates and ran away. The moment Reigo hears that, he instantly gets furious. But right as his emotions spike, another arrow suddenly slams toward him. Argio thinks he finally landed the hit, only to realize Reigo actually dodged at the last second and blocked the attack using the tiny knife Joan possessed. Then Reigo angrily says there's no way his brother would ever abandon his teammates like that. But Argio just shrugs and says he's not lying. According to him, the guild report proves everything. At the same time, more and more suffering ghosts begin appearing around Argio. And after the arrow falls to the ground, Argio suddenly notices something strange. The necromancy effect surrounding it disappeared. That means Reigo somehow released the ghost trapped inside it. For the first time, Argio admits he may have underestimated him a little. But then he immediately attacks again and punches Reigo directly in the face. Even Joan sounds surprised because she thought she slowed him down properly. But Argio quickly figures out the trick. He realizes the ability only slows his movements temporarily. So instead of worrying about it, he simply decides to move even faster than before. And then this absolute psychopath starts accelerating like crazy. Reigo can barely keep up anymore and starts panicking, wondering if advanced hunters are seriously this monstrous. Meanwhile, Argio casually picks up the broken arrow relic and starts talking to it. He says he honestly thought it was pretty useful at first, but now, since it got outsmarted by Potato Boy, it's officially fired. Then, without hesitation, he snaps the relic in half himself. And the moment he does, the trapped ghost screams in agony, crying that it hurts and begging to finally be released. Reigo looks at the suffering ghost and angrily asks Argio if he seriously can't understand how much pain it's in. But Argio honestly doesn't care at all. Instead, he immediately launches another attack while flames explode around the battlefield again. At the same time, Reigo prepares another counterattack of his own. Joan quickly activates bondage once more, causing Argio's movements to suddenly become heavy again. Even Argio notices it immediately and complains that his body feels heavy all over again. But this time, Reigo doesn't hesitate. Fueled completely by rage, he releases all of his firepower at once and finally lands a direct hit on Argio. And surprisingly, it actually works. Argio admits the attack genuinely hurt him while flames spread everywhere around the area. But even while burning, this guy still keeps moving, because apparently basic survival instincts are optional for him. Suddenly, Argio rushes in again to throw another punch. But this time, Reigo reacts properly. He narrowly dodges by lowering his body at the last second. Then, while holding the possessed knife, he signals Joan. Joan immediately gets annoyed and complains that Reigo shouldn't order her around like that. Even so, she activates bondage again and slows Argio's movements one more time. But now Argio notices something important, the knife itself, and suddenly his expression changes slightly. Then he laughs. He says Reigo managed to make him bleed just like his older brother once did. And because of that, Argio admits Reigo is actually becoming interesting to him. But instead of continuing the fight personally, he suddenly decides to leave everything to his security forces. As he starts walking away, his assistant quietly asks if that was really okay, especially since the thing Reigo stole was the holy relic containing information about Masakato's location. But Argio casually reveals something terrifying. Reigo didn't steal it by accident. Argio intentionally let him take it. He explains that Reigo was clearly obsessed with finding information about his brother, so he deliberately planted believable information and baited him perfectly into taking the relic. In other words, Reigo walked directly into his trap. But even after all that, Argio still seems more curious than angry, because Reigo's skill bothers him. During the fight, it almost looked like Reigo could actually see something invisible around him, and Argio wants to know exactly what that means. So now he plans to let Reigo come into contact with Masakato's relic next, just to see what happens. In a quiet alleyway, we see Reigo completely exhausted after barely escaping from Argio. Meanwhile, Joan immediately starts roasting him again. She points out that during that entire fight, he only managed to land a single proper attack. But surprisingly, Reigo still looks happy. He admits he had no choice but to run away, but at least he managed to free one of the suffering ghosts. And honestly, for Reigo, that alone already matters a lot. Then Joan asks if he finally understood the massive gap in power between him and Argio. Reigo immediately admits it. He says if it weren't for Joan's skill helping him slow Argio down, he probably would have died instantly. Joan then casually explains she could only help that much because she was forced to possess such cheap low-quality weapons. Honestly, she still hasn't emotionally recovered from the butter knife incident. Then Reigo finally says if they manage to find Joan's real sword, he should be able to bring out her abilities at full power. But Joan immediately corrects him again. His Fire Boy's sword. At this point, she's genuinely starting to suspect he's messing up the name on purpose. Still, despite everything that happened, Reigo suddenly admits something unexpected. He says that, in the end, he never even got the chance to properly ask Argio about his brother. And even after finally finding a clue related to Yugo, all he could do was run away. But strangely enough, he's actually excited. Joan quietly stares at him after hearing that. Then Reigo explains why. For his entire life, he believed strength had nothing to do with someone like him. But now, for the first time, he realizes he can genuinely become stronger as a hunter. And because of that, he feels unbelievably fired up right now. Joan stays silent for a second again. Then Reigo continues, saying if they can find Joan's sword, he'll become even stronger. And maybe then, he can finally uncover the truth behind his brother's disappearance. Joan instantly interrupts him again to remind him it's Fire Boy's sword, not Joan's sword. Then she asks him an important question. Does he actually have any kind of plan? Because there are countless dungeons out there. But Reigo confidently pulls out the mysterious book he stole earlier. He explains it seems to contain information connected to his brother. And considering how many relics are linked to Yugo, tracking the dungeons listed inside the book might eventually lead them to Joan's sword as well. And with that plan in mind, we suddenly cut to Gate Serial 8886, also known as Manji Hall. There, a staff member asks a suspicious-looking guy if he forgot his hunter license and asks for his name. And that guy is obviously Reigo in disguise. He casually introduces himself as Tanaka. Even Joan sounds confused hearing this fake identity and jokingly wonders if his full name is now somehow Tanaka Kakuri Yugo. Meanwhile, Reigo keeps bluffing his way through the situation and tells the others he'll bring his hunter ID after the raid. The people there start debating whether they should just check the guild server for verification. But another person points out there's no internet connection in the area and physical ID verification is required anyway. Then they bring out an aura measuring crystal instead. The moment Reigo sees it, he immediately comes up with another excuse. He says if his aura level meets the guild standards, then that should be enough proof he qualifies. And then he explains how aura basically works like a hunter's stamina and power source. The higher a hunter's aura, the stronger their overall abilities become. There's also a direct connection between aura levels and skill usage. For example, hunters with massive aura reserves can freely use advanced high-cost abilities that weaker hunters could never handle. Then the staff finally begin checking Reigo's aura level. At first, the receptionist looks completely unimpressed and says there's no way someone like him could meet the minimum requirement anyway. The dungeon requires at least C-rank aura. Another worker nearby explains they get people like this all the time. Apparently, low-rank hunters constantly try sneaking into higher-level dungeons hoping to boost their reputation. Most of them just end up dying and becoming unidentified corpses, which honestly only creates more paperwork. The receptionist then says they should just finish the reading already. If Reigo's aura is too low, they'll simply throw him out afterward. So Reigo quietly activates mediumship, and this time he uses all of his aura at once. The staff member tells him to stay still while the measurement begins. Meanwhile, Reigo thinks to himself that since Joan's aura merges together with his through mediumship, it should probably push him up to around C rank. Then the machine beeps, and suddenly, the staff members go completely silent, because instead of displaying a rank, the entire system glitches out. Then an error message appears. Everyone immediately gets confused. One staff member asks what kind of error this even is, while another starts panicking and says he didn't touch anything. Meanwhile, Reigo instantly acts innocent and asks what they did to break the machine. Honestly, this man lies with the confidence of someone who absolutely knows he caused the problem. Now the staff are stressed because they have to report the malfunction to headquarters. But eventually, one of them gives up and says fine, he'll let it slide this time as long as Reigo keeps quiet about it. He just tells Reigo to bring his hunter license later and sign the entry log. Reigo immediately thanks him and accepts before anyone changes their mind. But then one of the workers quietly mutters something terrifying. He says there probably won't even be a later, because most of them are likely going to die inside the dungeon anyway. And while staring at the broken aura scanner, another staff member suddenly remembers something important. Apparently, machines don't always display errors because they malfunction. Sometimes, an error appears because the aura level is too high for the machine to measure properly, like S-rank level high. And honestly, he never expected to see something like that in person. Later on, while the raid group gathers together, Reigo quietly waits nearby. Then Joan suddenly asks why he's been hiding his face the entire time. She says if he's doing it for style points, it's honestly pretty lame. Reigo immediately tells her she talks way too much. Then he explains the real reason. If people discover he's Calamity Reigo, nobody will let him join the raid. So he pretended to forget his hunter license and used a fake name instead. At this point, Reigo is basically speedrunning identity fraud. Then he reminds Joan that he's searching for her sword while also looking for clues connected to his brother. And naturally, Joan instantly corrects him again. It's Fireboy's sword, not Joan's sword. Then she tells him not to go searching for it just because he feels like it. Idiot. Still, Joan admits she doesn't think her beloved sword is actually inside this dungeon. But Reigo then brings up the mysterious notebook again. He says Joan saw the notes too. According to the information written inside, this dungeon has an awful reputation despite supposedly being low level. There's been a long chain of strange incidents connected to it. And even after all this time, nobody has successfully defeated the boss yet. Even the guy who owned that notebook had records of countless relics, yet he still suspected something powerful was hiding inside this dungeon, which means this place is definitely not normal. Reigo realizes the chances are slim, but if there's even a tiny possibility of finding clues related to his brother or Fireboy's sword, then they'll have to search every corner of the dungeon carefully. And honestly, Reigo can already feel it too. Something about this dungeon feels wrong. Then the raid leader suddenly steps forward and starts addressing everyone. He introduces himself as Fukuyama, the leader organizing the raid. Fukuyama explains that despite all the terrible rumors surrounding the dungeon, the boss evolution data still classifies it as only a B-rank dungeon. So according to him, they should clear it quickly, gain some fame, and collect the rewards without too much trouble. Then he casually mentions there's also a huge bonus reward for whoever lands the finishing blow on the boss. And immediately, everyone gets excited. Honestly, hunters hear the word bonus, and suddenly common sense disappears. Meanwhile, Reigo quietly keeps observing the crowd. But then, he suddenly notices something awful. One of the same idiots who mocked and tormented him earlier is also part of this raid group. The moment Reigo recognizes him, he immediately lowers his face even more to avoid being seen. Joan notices his reaction and asks what's wrong. Reigo explains those are the same people who broke Mr. Nakanishi's sword before. They were also the ones he fought right before meeting Joan. The moment he remembers that situation again, his mood instantly changes. Joan asks him what the problem is and jokingly wonders if he's actually scared of them. But Reigo quietly says something unexpected. He says he needs to stay in control because back then he couldn't do anything against them. But now he's worried he might accidentally kill them instead. Joan immediately bursts out laughing after hearing that. Honestly, even she didn't expect Potato Boy to start saying things that dangerous. Then Reigo quietly admits something else. For some reason, he's actually starting to look forward to this raid now. He just desperately hopes those idiots don't recognize him first. As Reigo climbs down the long rope ladder into the dungeon, he eventually reaches a strange underground area filled with dark liquid. The entire place feels disgusting. There's darkness everywhere. The air feels heavy, and even before using mediumship, Reigo immediately senses something is wrong. He quietly thinks that after dealing with cursed entities for so long, he can tell this place isn't normal. This doesn't feel like the spirit of some hunter who simply died during a raid. Something much worse is lurking here. But before he can think any further, someone suddenly calls out to him. A girl tells the baggage handler to hurry up and come over. Reigo gets startled for a second because he completely forgot he's undercover right now. Then the girl asks why he froze up the moment he entered the dungeon and wonders if this is his first time inside a B-rank dungeon. Reigo awkwardly admits that it actually is. The girl then says that explains why he looks so nervous. But she warns him that if he doesn't keep up with the group, he'll get lost inside the dungeon and never make it back out. Reigo immediately agrees. Meanwhile, inside his head, he's panicking because if he accidentally reveals he's here searching for personal clues, everyone will become suspicious instantly. So for now, he has to continue pretending to be a rookie baggage handler. The girl then tells him it's fine if he stays near the back and barely keeps up. According to her, it's actually a good opportunity for him to safely observe experienced hunters from behind. She also reassures him that the raid group already has plenty of strong hunters handling the front lines. Honestly, she has no idea the rookie baggage handler beside her fought a psychopath relic collector like 2 days ago. ago. Reigo awkwardly thanks her and tries asking for her name. She introduces herself as Lisa and says calling her senior sounds way too formal, so Reigo can just call her Lisa instead. Reigo immediately responds with Miss Lisa anyway, and Joan instantly starts judging him for it. She asks why he's acting so formal towards someone stronger than him. Then Lisa suddenly notices a weird smell coming from Reigo and asks if he smells like seaweed. Honestly, at this point, even Reigo probably doesn't know what cursed dungeon smell he's carrying around anymore. Then the guild leader suddenly calls out happily that the baggage handler finally arrived, meaning the raid can officially begin. Everyone starts moving deeper into the dungeon together. Unfortunately for Reigo, the same idiots who tormented him earlier are also part of the group. Thankfully, nobody recognizes him yet. The guild leader then orders everyone to move quickly, but after walking a bit farther into the dungeon, he suddenly stops so abruptly that the people behind him almost crash into him. One of the hunters immediately complains and asks why he stopped out of nowhere. Then the leader quietly asks something terrifying. Is that a human? Everyone looks ahead, and standing there in the darkness is something horrifying. At first glance, it almost looks human, but not really. Its entire body is wrapped like some ancient corpse, making it look more like a living mummy than an actual person. The moment the hunters realize it's probably a monster, panic immediately spreads. One hunter points out that mummies usually appear in much higher ranked dungeons than this one. And right after hearing that, the leader instantly orders everyone into battle formation. The atmosphere changes immediately. Then the leader quickly explains the monster's abilities. Unless they destroy its weak point, the mummy will regenerate endlessly. And even worse, the bandages covering its body are poisonous. According to him, even a tiny scratch could become fatal. Reigo watches the raid team move into formation and immediately realizes something. These hunters are on a completely different level compared to the random guilds he dealt with before. Nobody is panicking. Nobody is screaming. Everyone instantly understands their role and starts coordinating properly. Then the leader quickly explains the mummy's behavior. Apparently, the monster instinctively targets whoever has the strongest aura in the area, which means out of everyone present, it should naturally focus on Fukuyama first. The other hunters immediately start assigning positions and support roles around him. Everything looks perfectly organized. And then the mummy completely ignores Fukuyama and charges straight toward Reigo instead. Even Reigo is caught completely off guard by this. Honestly, the monster took one look at the baggage handler and immediately said, "Yeah, that guy looks suspicious." As the attack rushes toward him, Reigo panics and complains about why the monster chose him of all people. But since he has no other choice, he instantly activates mediumship and calls out to Joan. And naturally, Joan immediately complains about him ordering her around again. Still, she uses bondage and slows the monster's movements. That tiny opening gives Reigo just enough time to shift out of the way so the attack doesn't hit him directly. Even then, the impact still sends him crashing down into the strange liquid below. The other hunters watching the scene immediately assume the baggage handler just got destroyed. One even says the poor guy got taken out instantly. But after a moment, Reigo slowly resurfaces. Since he managed to dodge most of the attack, he's actually still alive. The others look surprised and start asking if he's okay, while another hunter casually says he probably just got lucky. Meanwhile, Fukuyama immediately focuses back on the monster and orders Tadu to use his skill to reveal the mummy's weak points. Tadu activates a skill called tomograph. A glowing circle spreads across the ground before scanning the mummy's entire body with light. The skill reveals the enemy's vital points, although the duration depends on aura consumption. As the scan spreads, Tadu suddenly notices something strange. The weak points are moving around inside the mummy's body. Even Fukuyama confirms he can see them shifting too. At that point, he realizes he can't hold back anymore. He says he originally wanted to save the skill for the dungeon boss, but they don't have a choice now. Then he unleashes a massive fire-based attack called homing. The flames roar toward the mummy at high speed. At first, the monster dodges out of the way, and even Reigo gets surprised and thinks Fukuyama missed. But then the flames suddenly curve back around, because the attack literally tracks its target automatically. Fukuyama keeps controlling the fire while it repeatedly chases and slams into the mummy over and over again. Soon, the entire creature is engulfed in flames. One of the morons from earlier starts praising Fukuyama's skill, saying that once homing locks onto a target, escaping becomes impossible. But while everyone else is impressed, one of the female hunters notices something concerning. Fukuyama already looks exhausted after using the skill, and she quietly asks if it was really a good idea for him to use that much power in a place like this. Fukuyama admits that with his current aura reserves, he can only use the homing skill 3 times at most. Originally, he wanted to save those attacks for the dungeon boss, but according to him, he had no choice. If he hadn't stepped in earlier, Reigo probably would have died right there. Meanwhile, Joan suddenly points something out. She reminds Reigo that the monster ignored everyone else and came straight for him first. first. Then she wonders if it reacted to his abnormal aura. Reigo immediately says this is absolutely not the time to joke around about that, because if he fought back too seriously earlier, everyone would have immediately realized he's actually Calamity Reigo. Joan instantly starts making fun of him again. She says that's true because then everyone would discover he's actually Stinky Reigo. Reigo immediately gets offended and starts arguing back that he's not stinky, and somehow the conversation rapidly devolves into him angrily repeating "Stinky Calamity" to himself like he's losing an argument against a ghost middle schooler. But then, the mood completely changes, because suddenly, Reigo notices movement all around them. More monsters begin emerging from the darkness one after another, and within seconds, the hunters realize they're surrounded. Now the entire raid team is trapped in an extremely dangerous position. Fukuyama and the others immediately tense up because things just went from difficult to absolutely terrible. Meanwhile, Joan casually laughs and says that whenever Reigo truly lives up to the name Calamity Reigo, disasters somehow always follow him. And hearing that honestly does not help Reigo's stress levels at all. Now he's fully panicking while staring at the overwhelming number of monsters closing in from every direction. Fukuyama looks around at the monsters closing in from every direction and immediately realizes how bad the situation is. They're completely surrounded, and the worst part is they were already struggling against just one mummy earlier, even after Fukuyama used one of his strongest skills. Now there are 16 of them. At that point, even he starts thinking there's no realistic way the raid team can handle this many enemies. Out of the entire guild, only 4 hunters are actually capable of properly fighting A-class monsters. So Fukuyama immediately turns toward Tadu and tells her to locate all of the enemy's weak points again. Tadu warns him that using tomograph on this scale will almost completely drain her aura. But despite that, she activates the skill anyway. This time, the scan spreads across the entire battlefield, lighting up every mummy at once and revealing all of their weak points clearly. The moment the scan finishes, Fukuyama immediately orders everyone to go all out before the effect disappears. And just like that, the entire raid team charges in. Some hunters rush forward with blades. Others fire arrows from a distance. Everyone starts desperately throwing everything they have at the monsters. Meanwhile, Reigo is still standing there trying to process the chaos around him. Then suddenly, one of the same idiots who bullied him earlier jumps in front of him to protect him without realizing who he actually is. The guy yells at Reigo for standing around blankly and tells the baggage handler to at least support the team properly with his gear. Reigo awkwardly agrees, but before anything else can happen, another hunter gets attacked horribly by one of the mummies. The healer instantly panics. The injured hunter screams for help because his arm was literally ripped off. But the healer is already busy treating someone else and desperately says she needs a moment. Unfortunately, the dungeon does not care about scheduling conflicts. Another attack immediately follows, and this time even the healer gets hit badly. Then the battlefield completely falls apart. One by one, hunters start getting overwhelmed by the mummies. Reigo keeps watching all of this happen until he finally decides he can't stay back anymore. Joan immediately reminds him that exposing his identity was supposed to be a problem, but Reigo says he can't afford to hold back in a situation like this. And then he realizes something terrifying. The reason so many mummies appeared here might not just be bad luck. It could actually be because of his overwhelming aura. Meanwhile, Joan quietly thinks that Reigo still hasn't fully realized the truth yet. His calamity isn't just superstition anymore. It's directly connected to how abnormal his aura has become. Then suddenly, the nearby mummies all notice Reigo at the same time and immediately rush toward him. Even Lisa notices the danger and yells at the baggage handler to watch out. But the moment one of the mummies grabs hold of Reigo's bag, the monster suddenly bursts into flames and burns away instantly from Reigo's counterattack. Lisa stares in complete shock. She can't believe the mummy disappeared in a single hit and starts wondering what she just witnessed. Even Joan looks impressed now. She says it seems Reigo finally learned how to properly use her skill after all. And honestly, she reluctantly gives him credit for it. Meanwhile, the rest of the hunters can barely believe what they're seeing either. The same baggage handler they thought was useless just erased a monster instantly while they've been struggling this entire time. And as Fukuyama watches all this happen, he quietly realizes something important. Whether it was luck, coincidence, or something else entirely, once they entered this dungeon together, Reigo officially became part of the fight now. The hunters keep struggling against the swarm of mummies, while the same guy who protected Reigo earlier stares around in complete confusion, trying to understand what's even happening anymore. Then Reigo slowly takes out his weapon, and while looking at the hunters around him, he quietly says something unexpected. They're all his teammates. The moment he says that, flames begin burning across his weapon again. But this time, the aura feels completely different. Even Joan notices it immediately. She starts wondering if Rhaego became even stronger after the last fight. But then she realizes something more important. His desire to protect everyone around him is pushing his power even further beyond its normal limits. At this point, Rhaego's aura has already doubled compared to before. And on top of that, Joan's aura is now layering over his as well. The combined energy starts exploding upward exponentially. Even Joan sounds genuinely interested now. Meanwhile, Rhaego finally shouts what he's truly feeling inside. He says he's going to save everyone from this calamity no matter what happens. Because if someone dies here because of Rhaego Corazzato, then he'll blame himself for it forever. And honestly, hearing the guy called Calamity Rhaego desperately trying to save everyone instead of abandoning them hits surprisingly hard. Then Rhaego grips his weapon tightly and calls out to Joan. He tells her it's time to go. Joan immediately complains that it's not like she has much choice anymore. But even while acting annoyed, she activates bondage again. And this time, the flames surrounding Rhaego burn even more violently than before. Meanwhile, the mummies continue charging at the hunters from every direction. But now, Rhaego is finally stepping onto the battlefield seriously. As Joan activates bondage once again, Rhaego's weapon bursts with even stronger flames, and then he completely disappears into the battlefield. With everyone around him slowed down, Rhaego starts moving through the battlefield at insane speed, slashing through the mummies one after another with his burning sword. Every time a mummy tries attacking one of the hunters, Rhaego instantly appears there first and cuts it down before it can land the hit. At this point, the battlefield basically turns into a horror movie for the mummies instead. And because everything around him is slowed, Rhaego can move across the area almost effortlessly. Meanwhile, Joan is genuinely shocked by what she's seeing. She realizes Rhaego's aura is way stronger than she originally thought. To slow down every enemy and fight them all at the same time already requires absurd aura control. But right now, even Fukuyama himself is getting slowed down by the effect. Meanwhile, Fukuyama is still desperately fighting while using the skills he originally wanted to save for the boss fight. But suddenly, even he starts feeling his body slow down heavily. And then, the effect disappears. Everything returns to normal speed instantly. The hunters quickly look around in confusion, completely unable to understand what just happened. Since all of them were slowed down during the battle, nobody properly saw Rhaego moving. Then Fukuyama suddenly notices something important. The mummies are still alive. One of the girls immediately warns him to watch out. Then Fukuyama, Lisa, and the others quickly finish off the remaining weakened mummies together. At this point, the monsters are already so damaged that the raid team can defeat them easily. But nobody realizes Rhaego was the one who weakened almost all of them. The hunters are completely confused now. One of them says the mummy he was fighting suddenly burst into flames and disappeared out of nowhere. Another asks Fukuyama if he secretly used another skill, but Fukuyama immediately denies it. He says he was already at his aura limit and honestly thought maybe Akai or Tadu did something instead, but they immediately deny it too. Meanwhile, one of the girls is still in shock and says she genuinely thought she was going to die. Fukuyama then quietly says it's basically a miracle everyone survived. But more importantly, nobody died, and hearing that alone relieves everyone massively. Meanwhile, Rhaego quietly smiles to himself in the background. He says he's just glad everyone is okay. But then he starts blaming himself again, thinking his calamity almost dragged the entire raid team into disaster once more. Joan immediately shuts that idea down. She tells him he completely misunderstood the situation. There's no such thing as someone born only to bring disasters. The real reason those mummies gathered there was because they were attracted to Rhaego's overwhelming aura. And for the first time, Rhaego seriously starts thinking about that possibility. Meanwhile, Lisa quietly watches him from a distance. She's now completely convinced that the baggage handler definitely did something during the battle. She remembers seeing him move so fast that he practically vanished from sight. She couldn't even properly follow his movements. And now she desperately wants to know who this guy actually is. Meanwhile, after barely surviving the battle, the exhausted hunters finally decide to take a short break. Then Tadu quietly points out the obvious. This dungeon is definitely not just B rank anymore. So she asks Fukuyama if they should retreat and regroup instead. But Fukuyama immediately shakes his head, because this is a quest-type dungeon. And once inside, they can't leave until the boss is defeated. He admits things would have been easier if they had an escape item, but since they don't, their only option is to call for backup. So Fukuyama decides they'll send out a distress signal and request reinforcements instead. Fukuyama quickly takes out a communication device and tries sending a distress signal to headquarters. But the moment the device starts beeping strangely, his expression changes immediately. Then he quietly says they need to rethink their next move because the device isn't working at all. Tadu and the others instantly realize what that means. They can't contact HQ. you. The moment everyone hears that, panic spreads through the group. One hunter immediately starts freaking out, saying this was supposed to be only a B-rank dungeon. Nobody warned them they could end up trapped inside. Another hunter openly says he doesn't want to die there. Honestly, the group morale collapses faster than Reigo's fake identity if somebody recognizes him. Lisa quickly tries calming everyone down. She reminds them that all 15 of them survived the previous fight together, meaning they still have a chance if they stay calm. But then another hunter suddenly gets confused. 15 people? The raid party only had 14 members. Lisa pauses for a second. Then she quietly says she definitely counted 15. At that moment, even Joan looks surprised, because somehow Lisa can actually sense her presence. Lisa starts counting everyone again carefully. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And right as she reaches the final number, a gigantic horrifying monster suddenly appears nearby. At first, it almost looks like maybe Lisa accidentally counted the monster itself. But then she finally realizes what she's actually seeing and immediately starts screaming. It's a human-faced spider. And honestly, that thing sounds exactly as horrifying as it looks. Everyone instantly warns the others that while the creature itself isn't especially strong, getting caught by it is basically nightmare fuel. Because if it captures someone, it lays eggs inside their body and turns them into food for its babies. Yeah, absolutely not. Then the spider suddenly starts laughing in this creepy, distorted voice and announces that Lord Masakato is coming. The moment Reigo hears that name, his attention sharpens immediately, because Masakato was mentioned inside the notebook he stole from Argio. The notes specifically connected that name to the holy relic. But before anyone can react further, the spider suddenly turns around and runs away deeper into the dungeon. Fukuyama immediately orders everyone to chase after it, but Tadu quickly stops him and points something terrifying out. They're being followed. At first, everyone just hears distant noises echoing through the dungeon. Then Fukuyama realizes what the sound actually is. The bloody mummies are coming again, and there are a lot of them. At that point, the group realizes they have no choice anymore. Following the spider is now their only escape route, so Fukuyama immediately orders everyone to move. As the group rushes deeper into the dungeon, Reigo keeps thinking about the name Masakato. That name was definitely connected to the holy relic inside Argio's notebook, which means they might finally be getting close to something important. Meanwhile, Joan looks around the gloomy dungeon and comments on how miserable the place feels. According to her, it's hard to believe something called a masterpiece could exist somewhere this bleak. But surprisingly, Reigo sounds almost optimistic for once. He says he managed to make it all the way toward the relic without getting lost, which for someone like him honestly feels like miraculous luck already. And with that, the group continues moving deeper into the darkness. The entire group keeps following the human-faced spider deeper into the dark dungeon. And honestly, the deeper they go, the worse the atmosphere becomes. Meanwhile, Lisa quietly walks along with everyone while thinking to herself that following a monster like this is obviously a terrible idea, because if they keep chasing it, they're definitely going to run straight into another huge fight. At this point, even she can tell this dungeon is far beyond normal B-rank difficulty. She starts regretting joining the raid entirely. But then her attention shifts toward Reigo. To her, this suspicious baggage handler suddenly looks way stronger than before. And after seeing what happened during the mummy fight, Lisa starts thinking this is actually the perfect chance to figure out what kind of monster this guy really is. So she secretly activates a skill called Melancholy. Immediately after using it, Reigo notices something wrong and looks back at her. Then he asks if she's okay. Lisa pretends she injured her leg during the previous battle, and while acting hurt, she activates Melancholy again. The skill itself is honestly pretty sneaky. It allows her to fake injuries on herself or even on other people. It doesn't actually cause real damage, but it can manipulate emotions, create sympathy, or make enemies panic. Basically, it's professional gaslighting as a hunter skill. Even Lisa admits the ability has all kinds of uses. Meanwhile, Reigo immediately gets worried and says the injury looks serious. Lisa internally realizes she may have overacted a little too hard. Then Reigo suddenly kneels down and starts wrapping bandages around her leg to stop the bleeding. Lisa thanks him, but at this point she's genuinely shocked by how ridiculously kind he is. Honestly, she's never seen Melancholy work this effectively on someone before. Then Reigo goes even further and says she probably won't be able to walk properly with that injury, so he'll carry her on his back instead. And just like that, Reigo starts carrying her while continuing through the dungeon. Lisa quietly thanks him again, but inside her head, she's already planning something much darker. If things get really dangerous, she's thinking about using Reigo as a shield to buy herself enough time to survive. Because eventually someone stronger will probably defeat the boss anyway, or reinforcements might arrive first. So her current plan is to stay away from the main danger and survive no matter what. But then suddenly, she looks behind the group and completely freezes, because a massive horde of bloody mummies is charging straight toward them from behind. Lisa immediately starts panicking and screams that they're surrounded. Then she desperately repeatedly tells everyone not to slow down and to keep moving immediately. Reigo turns around in confusion and asks what she means. But the moment he looks back and sees the horde himself, he instantly understands the situation. And somehow, instead of panicking, Reigo calmly says that if they deal with the mummies here, the others won't be in danger anymore. Lisa immediately loses it and tells him to stop mumbling nonsense and just run already. But at the same moment, Joan activates bondage once again. Meanwhile, deeper inside the dungeon, Fukuyama and the others finally arrive in front of a massive gate. As they stare at it, they notice countless tiny spiders crawling everywhere around the entrance. And judging by their appearance, they look like the babies of the giant human-faced spider from earlier. The human-faced spider suddenly stops in front of the massive gate and tells the hunters to wait there. And then, something huge appears in front of them. At first glance, it looks like a gigantic monstrous rat, but the moment Fukuyama sees it properly, his expression completely changes. He immediately recognizes it as a red-crowned dragon. And according to him, that thing is far beyond B-rank level. It's an actual A-rank monster, which means the raid team was tricked from the very beginning. Fukuyama quickly realizes that if they want to escape this quest-type dungeon alive, they'll have to defeat that monster somehow. But the situation only gets worse. The creature's glowing red eyes alone are enough to terrify everyone, and the moment it lets out a massive roar, panic instantly spreads through the group. The hunters can't believe what they're seeing. That monster is supposed to be the dungeon boss, but the way it's behaving, it almost looks domesticated, like somebody is literally keeping an A-rank dungeon boss as a pet. And if that thing is only a pet, then whatever its owner is must be even stronger. At this point, everyone realizes they've entered something far beyond a normal dungeon. Meanwhile, the human-faced spider suddenly starts worshipping something in front of the gate. It excitedly announces that its lord has arrived and repeatedly tells everyone to bow. Then all the smaller spiders start chanting the same thing together. And honestly, the entire scene becomes unbelievably creepy. Suddenly, a massive aura begins forming in front of the hunters. The energy grows brighter and brighter until a mysterious figure slowly starts appearing within it. Fukuyama immediately demands to know why they were brought there. But instead of answering directly, the figure continues forming, while an enormous sword becomes visible inside the aura. Then the mysterious being finally speaks. It says the blade thirsts for blood, especially blood filled with hatred and suffering. Then it orders Fukuyama to turn around and slaughter the comrades standing behind him using that sword, and in exchange, promises to spare his life. The moment everyone hears that, the entire group freezes in fear. Even the hunters standing behind Fukuyama start panicking badly. But Fukuyama immediately refuses. He says there's no way he would ever do something like that. Then, despite already being exhausted, he decides to gamble everything on one final attack. He activates homing again and pours the rest of his remaining aura into the skill. The blazing attack shoots straight toward the mysterious figure and pierces directly through the aura. For a moment, the figure actually starts fading apart, and the hunters immediately begin celebrating, thinking Fukuyama somehow pulled it off. But then the aura suddenly reforms again, completely unharmed. And this time, the figure calmly starts using some kind of terrifying magic. Fukuyama keeps staring at it, trying to react, but before anyone can even properly understand what happened, he gets cut down instantly. The leader of the raid collapses right in front of everyone. And just like that, the entire group loses the one person holding everything together. Do you want more of this story?